Welcome to the Lights Film School video tutorial on the 180-degree rule and other shot sequencing tips. But before we begin, we'd like to take a moment to show you our lighting setup for this tutorial. We always like to do this to remind you that you don't need a truckload of lights and equipment to create strong compositions and well-lit shots. Here we have a wide shot showing our scene. In this shot, we're only using two lights. We have an overhead practical light exposing our main character and a small kino flow in the background acting as a rim light and giving our background a bit of texture. Here is how it looks in a medium shot with a third light located behind the curtain turned on. Now we'll show you one by one what each light is doing. We'll turn our rim light off so you can see specifically what it accomplishes in this scene. Now we'll turn it back on. Its intensity is a bit too hot, so let's turn it back down to ensure we don't blow out the whites around our subject. There we go. We still have a nice highlight around our subject, but now the bright areas of the frame have been tamed. Now we'll turn the light behind the curtain off. And now back on again. Now we'll turn off the overhead lamp above the main subject. As you can see, we're left with nothing other than a little rim around the subject, some light behind the curtain, and a small splash of light on our background. Not quite enough for a proper exposure, so let's turn our lamp back on. There we go. Okay, so let's get back on topic and discuss the 180-degree rule. First, let's establish our scene geography by creating our line of action. Let's look overhead to see how we establish this line. Here we draw a line towards the subject and the person or object they're in communication with. In this case, our subject is reading a piece of paper, so let's draw our line in this direction. The 180-degree rule states that the camera cannot jump the imaginary line of action. This helps ensure your scene direction stays consistent and you don't disorientate your audience. Now let's see how it looks on the ground if we break the 180-degree rule. Notice if we change the camera position from here to here, the image reverses like this and gives the impression that the subject is talking to himself. In shot A, he's looking camera left. In shot B, he's looking camera right. This disorientates your audience, which for the most part, and of course there are exceptions, but you'll try to avoid. There are cases when you can jump the line of action. Again, as long as you establish a clear sense of scene geography during your master shot, you may find you have more liberty to jump the line of action. That being said, if you don't need to jump the line of action, you should try to avoid it. What we'd like to explore now is a shooting and editing practice to help you add a little more dynamism to your shot sequences. It's often visually a little more interesting when you come back to a shot if there is a slight variation in it. It will often be the case that some emotional change or circumstance will motivate these visual changes. So let's create a scenario. Let's imagine our character is face to face with his lifelong nemesis. Our character is reading his nemesis an incriminating transcript from a taped conversation from a few weeks ago. Our shot A establishes that our character is reading from a paper. Notice that our shot A is a bit hot. Let's turn down our rim light to tame the burnt out whites on the back of the subject's head. That's better. Okay, now let's start thinking about this shot. Why don't we do two takes of the same shot from slightly different depth perspectives? Our first shot, shot A, will be when our protagonist is going over the transcript for the first time. The second shot will be a close-up insert shot, showing the paper he's looking at. The third shot will be when he looks up from the paper, having discovered new information. For this third shot, we want to be psychologically a little closer to the inner workings of our character so let's punch in a little bit like this. There, that's much better. These shot choices and framing variations not only help you complement the narrative thrust of your story, but they also ensure your editing and shooting style is dynamic and changing with your character, rather than being static and lifeless. Remember, your camera needs to act as a sort of metaphor to things that are happening within your story. Let's run the scene once in a static fashion by keeping our shots A and C the same with an insert shot in the middle. This is how it will look. Here we have shot A. Here we have shot B. And here we have shot C, which is identical to shot A. The shots side by side would look something like this. But now, let's change our shot C from our shot A to complement the emotional change experienced within the scene. Again, here we have shot A. He's looking through the transcripts for the first time. He finds a piece of information that troubles him, and so he hesitates. We follow this up with shot B, the insert shot, when he looks down at the piece of paper. Now as we come back to shot C, he has new information he doesn't yet know what to do with. He thinks and thinks. The camera is positioned closer to him than it was in shot A to help bring the audience closer to the inner workings of his mind. This camera setup complements the nature of the story better than the first camera setup did. The first example was far too static. The changes in the second example are subtle, but the impact is fairly dramatic. The shots side by side would look something like this. Now let's compare the two shot sequence options side by side. Above is the more static example. Below you'll find the example that is much more dynamic.